Okay, I'm going to be sharing my screen now once again. So thanks for coming to How to Ask for a Letter of Recommendation. So for many of you, you are probably either applying to graduate school or potentially applying to various scholarships, or maybe just going into the job market potentially, or even just internships in general. These are all things that you would potentially need a letter of recommendation for. And we can go ahead and go on to the next slide. So we get a lot of questions from students who ask, who should I be asking a letter recommendation from? Well, that depends. It depends on the program you're applying to. It depends on the scholarship you're applying to. It depends on the job. So for a lot of graduate school programs, they're often asking for professors, right? Faculty members. Let's say if you're applying to like more business school, let's say you're getting your MBA, sometimes they ask for specific supervisors, and then sometimes professors as well. If you're applying to a job, I think oftentimes they're looking for anybody, professors or TAs or supervisors, someone who can speak to you or speak to of your experiences and your skills. Okay, so that's kind of the first step, is really identifying who you need to ask, right? And specific people in your life that maybe you've come across with, whether you've worked with them in a lab setting or in a work setting. And so one of the things that you also want to figure out is, can this person speak to your abilities? Is it a person that you know well and who knows you well, right? There's different ways to identify faculty members to ask for letters of recommendation. So maybe perhaps you don't have that list yet, and maybe you don't have any specific people in mind, but you're starting to really make those connections and make those relationships. Perhaps you're very early on in this process, so in applying to grad school or applying to scholarships, and you still have time. Now's a good time to start establishing those relationships. So what does that mean? That means going to office hours. Obviously, you can't go in person, but you can attend virtual office hours. UCI and just so many departments are putting on lots of virtual events right now. So an easy way to start the conversation is just by going to maybe one of those virtual events and then following up afterwards. Like, hey, I saw you at this particular event that social sciences put on, and, I found your research and your work really fascinating. Is it possible that I can talk to you about, a little bit more about your research, or whatever that might be, or a little bit more about your graduate school experience? And this is how you can kind of get that conversation and that relationship started. And it's a matter of maintaining that, right? And then, Leo, do you have anything to add in terms of identifying individuals for letters of recommendation?
I definitely agree with Carissa. I think definitely just check out the programs you're applying. And especially if you're applying for academic-wise, such as PhD program, then faculty members are the only choice, because maybe lecturers are not even enough, because we want people to have research experience. PhD programs require students to do research in the program, right? Professors are the ones who mainly do the research in the university. So lecturers may not be enough to write your recommendation letter. So definitely go for the faculty members. But of course, if it's MBA, they may require you to have work experience. So you may want to ask for a recommendation letter from your companies or your internship or wherever that you feel comfortable with. So it really depends on the program. I agree with Carissa.
Thanks, Leo. And yeah, another easy way to start identifying professors is from your courses that you're taking right now, or maybe previous courses as well. Perhaps there's someone that you do feel comfortable with, you've been doing well in their classes, then start getting to know them, attend their office hours, and see if you can request even having an informational interview with them, just to get to know them a little bit better about their experiences. So these are all ways that you can certainly start establishing that relationship, so that you feel confident in asking for a letter recommendation in the very near future. All right. Okay, so kind of moving on. So let's talk a little bit more about how to ask, right? So you can certainly ask, well, obviously the first thing to do would be to ask in person, but we can't do that right now, and that's okay. The next best thing is to maybe set up a Zoom interview or Zoom meeting. You can certainly ask them via Zoom or during their virtual office hours. And also the next best thing is just sending them an email. And this is just an example of what an email would look like. It doesn't need to be very long or very lengthy. Obviously, think about the professors' time. Obviously, they're very busy people. And so you want to be aware of that. But ultimately, what you want to provide them are very certain things that we're actually going to go over right now. But this is what an example email would look like. Obviously, you would provide, the basic information, maybe where you're applying, how many letters of recommendation that you would need, as well as deadlines that are in place. There's also going to be very specific things that you will need attached. So we're going to go over that right now. So when you are asking, giving that ask, you want to provide, what exactly are you applying to? Is it a graduate program? Is it a scholarship? Is it an internship? Another opportunity? So kind of being able to provide all that information very clearly. Another thing that you're going to want to attach to your email or, email them is an actual draft of maybe your personal statement or your statement of purpose. So these are the essays that a lot of graduate programs are going to be asking for. Sometimes scholarships will be asking for personal statements. And so you want to provide them with a draft because obviously they might know you, but there might be some things that you share in these essays that will provide a little bit more information for them to help them write a very strong letter recommendation. Another thing that you should also include is either a copy of your resume or your curriculum vitae, which is also known as a CV. So in there, you should be listing, all your activities that you've done, maybe leadership, volunteer opportunities, any research opportunities that you've taken advantage of, other coursework. So that way they can get a better understanding of who you are and the experiences that you've had. And so this really helps with kind of structuring the letter recommendation and saying, I've had this experience with a student in my class, they're super awesome, but look at all the other things that they've done. So they can also speak to that as well. Another thing that you should also include, or they might ask for, is a transcript. So that way they can kind of see how you've been doing in other courses and the GPA that you're able to maintain. I know personally when I've done letters of recommendations for my students, I always put, this is their GPA, they've been excelling in these courses. And so that way you can be able to, or the faculty member or whoever's writing the letter recommendation can really highlight you as a well-rounded student for whatever you're applying to. Another thing that you will also want to share with them is the list of schools that you're applying to. So a common question that we get is, how many, letters is it okay for your faculty member to write? Is 20 too much? Potentially, it depends. So what typically happens is that they'll write the letter of recommendation for you, and then they'll kind of just change out the school, all right? They'll change out the school or other certain information. So it's essentially the same letter, but they might be setting it to 20 different schools. Other things that you'll have to be aware of is if this letter recommendation needs to be sent in paper form, then you'll also need to prepare a stamped envelope, and any other information that they might need in order to send that. So, make sure it's self-addressed or you provide the address that they need. If it's a letter recommendation that they can just submit online, then you're going to want to provide all the various links that they might need in order to submit that. So, Leo, do you have anything else to add in terms of preparation-wise?
I think I think just don't feel afraid that you're asking for too much. Maybe 20 is a little bit too much, but then sometimes, but sometimes like if you're applying, because I am a PhD student, so I always stand on the PhD student. If you're applying to PhD program, that kind of standpoint. If you're applying to PhD programs, it's actually hard to get into PhD programs. So sometimes you may apply 15, 20, even 25 programs. And yeah, so it is a lot. So don't feel afraid. But I understand that professors are busy and sometimes you may be like afraid of asking for too much, but most of them will understand as long as you kind of have a close relationship with them. So that all goes back to what Carissa said at the beginning, that you need to kind of build a relationship with them at an early stage, so later you don't feel always if it's too much to ask for these minor recognition charters.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Leo. All right, moving on. So timeline, when should you ask? I would say ask at least 1 to 2 months in advance. This is at least. Again, professors are really busy, and you can imagine that students are asking all at the same time because graduate programs deadlines are around the same time. And so you want to be mindful of that. So even if you start asking earlier than 2 months, I think that's okay too. You just want to make sure that you are able to kind of check in with them. Another thing is, again, accessibility. So when you do ask, sometimes professors will say no. And that's okay. It's nothing to take personally. It just might mean kind of the time that they have on their hands, okay? And then, of course, you'll always want to follow up at least 1 to 2 weeks beforehand, just to make sure that they're able to make the deadline as well. Leo, do you have anything else to add in terms of kind of deadline?
That I don't, but I see some Q&A questions. I'm not sure if we should answer it right now or we should answer it later.
Oh, we can answer it towards the end.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Carissa, I think you're muted. We couldn't hear you. Carissa?
Sorry about that. Thanks for letting me know, Leo. So we were previously talking about submissions, and so providing clear submission details to your recommender. So this means address, deadline, dates, and envelopes. Another really important thing is keeping in touch with your recommender after this process is over. So you want to follow up and let them know where you've been accepted. You'll also want to send them a thank you email or a thank you letter as just a courtesy for, having them help you along this process. This kind of helps kind of foster the relationship that you've already established at the very beginning, and then hopefully that you'll be able to maintain that beyond UCI and even into your graduate school program or maybe your fellowship or whatever that might be. Leo, do you have any suggestions for how to maintain connections with faculty even after this whole graduate school process?
Yeah, I think definitely send out emails maybe once in a while, just kind of check on them, but not saying that like, oh, I'm just checking on you, but more like, oh, I hope you're doing well, and I hope your research progress is doing well. I see, and the best thing is always try to Google Scholar their names and see if they have like new publications. Or go to their personal website to see what kind of research papers they're working on, and they're saying, oh, I see that you're working on this research paper publications. I found it very fascinating. I just saying compliments, and especially towards their publications, it's very, very important. It may sound like, oh, maybe you're just flattering, but publications are kind of like, live to the professors. So a good way to keep in touch or just to maintain a good relationship, maybe because you never know when you're going to talk to this person again, or maybe you will get some help from them, even after getting into the PhD program, after getting into grad school, or maybe later in your life, in the workplace. So just say something nice towards their publications, or show that you care about their lives. That's good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to maintain contact is to say, hey, I saw you in this article or this publication. Or even if you find various articles online and you just want to keep in touch in that way, like that's another really great way that I think students often keep in touch with their faculty members or supervisors or whatever it might be. All right, and so we have come to the end and we'll be answering your questions very shortly, but just want to kind of give SSARC a shout out. If you would like to make an appointment with myself or even Leo to talk more about applying to scholarships or grad school or just letters of recommendation in general, Zoom is, or not Zoom, SSARC is here for you over Zoom. You can actually make appointments with us, go directly on our website. We also encourage you to follow us on social media on our Instagram and Facebook page at UC Irvine SSARC. We post a lot of various events on there and kind of updates, so lots of good stuff. So be sure to do that. And then, of course, last but not least, we also are giving out a Grubhub gift card. And so if you are a winner, just check out your email inbox and you'll be receiving that prize. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so we can take a look at your questions. We got a good amount here. Leo will also be helping me answer these. So the first one is, should you specify which courses you have taken with a professor when sending the email? Yes, if that can help them jog their memory, absolutely. If you can incorporate any of those courses that you've taken with them, maybe you're like, I'm in your course right now, or I took your course previously back in fall, that will kind of help them like, oh yes, of course, I remember this student and how awesome they were. Luke, do you have anything to add to that particular question? Or not Luke, Leo, I'm sorry.
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, sounds good. The next question we have is, how would you approach a professor who you have not seen in a while? So for context, I did really well in their class my first year, however, I'm currently a third year. Leo, do you want to answer this one?
Yes, I actually have the same experience because I took the class when I was in second year, and the professor actually left UC Irvine. He went to another school. So, but what we did is I actually asked him that I had a strong interest of applying to grad school, but I was only second year, so I wasn't sure. So I told him about all of these, all of my concerns, all of my questions. So what he did is he left some notes about me, and that's he told me that he was like, I'm gonna leave some notes about you. I may not remember you, but that's okay. Just email me, even though I'm not in even though I will be not because he already knew that he's gonna be in another school. So he was like, even though I probably wouldn't be in UC Irvine, but just email me. I should remember you, and that's exactly what we did. And maybe I think I applied when I was. Actually, I took a extra fifth year, so I applied when I was fifth year. So that's actually 4 years after I took his class. And I emailed him, and I definitely, like Carissa said, especially the first question, I reminded him about what class I took, and also I kind of just reminded him. He told me that he would leave some notes, and he replied me. He was like, "Oh yeah, that's true," and that's how it worked. So just when you try to approach a professor, just email them and gently nudge them to remind them, this is what we did, this is what we talked, and you kind of promised me you're gonna write me one, but not saying that you should say that you promised me, but just kind of saying, just nudge them a little bit to say that we talked. That's a perfect way.
Yes, absolutely. So our next question we have kind of more of a general question, how do you build that relationship with a professor? So again, a lot of these things that we're already talking about. So that means, following up with maybe a publication that they've written, or maybe an article that they've been involved in, or even just a friendly hello. And hopefully after this pandemic, you can actually reach out to them and say, hey, is it possible that we can get some coffee at some time? Like that's another way to kind of build that relationship as well. Being able to attend the events that they're participating in. So maybe it's virtual events or maybe in-person events, go to them. Sticking around after class if we were back in person, or again, going to their office hours. Think about it as, any relationship, you have to put some work into it. So kind of keep that in mind, and, just be mindful of your time and their time as well. And let's see. All right, our next question is, do professors expect you to give them a present after they write you a letter or rec? This happened at my high school, but I'm not sure if this is the same in college. That's a really interesting question. I think it's up to you. I've definitely had students who've given me chocolate for writing letter recommendation. I wouldn't think it's not necessary at all. I never expect a present after it, but I do think that an email, like a thank you email or a thank you letter, is warranted because you do want to thank them in some way. Whether you do that with a gift, I think that's up to you and kind of your own personal situation if you're able to do that. Leo, what has been your experience?
Because I did ask, this is the interesting question. I actually asked one of the professors I felt super close with. I was like, because I don't want to be inappropriate. So I asked him like, oh, should I send, because I got 3 professors. So besides this one, I got 2 more, right? So I want to know that if I should, do something for them. And the professor that I talked to told me that never, just don't do anything. Don't even send one single present. It's not required. But a thank you email is fine. Like a thank you gift card, a thank you card is fine. Just no money involved. But to the professor that already left UCRI, he suggested me that maybe you can send out like a small gift card, like maybe $5 Starbucks card. That's good enough. So just don't. If you do want to give a present, don't be too expensive.
Yeah, really interesting question. Thank you for submitting that. All right, next question is, do you have any advice for what to do if you cannot find a third professor to write that letter recommendation? Good one as well. Leo, do you want to answer or start this one?
Yeah, so what I did is, it's actually hard, right? Because you need 3 professors. So what I did is I kind of plan out I kind of draw out whatever research interest I have when I was trying to apply to grad school. So for example, I was really interested in macroeconomics and monetary policies. So I didn't know who I want the third professor was. So what I did is I go onto the school website to see the list of the econ professors, and then they usually have the personal websites there, or they have their research interests already up there. So I searched whoever has a similar interest as I did, and I emailed them. Of course, at the beginning, I wasn't saying that I want a Rex, but what I said is, oh, I'm really interested in, again, very publications. I'm very interested in articles you did. So I kind of just went to their office hour for like a couple of times. Then I started asking for grad school advice and like a Rex. So if you don't have any person in mind, just just go on school website to see if anyone has a similar interest with you. Most of the times, not all the times, most of the times professors are willing to talk to you. But if this one doesn't work, there are always people who have the similar interest with you in some other areas. So just try to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of like you have to start from square one again, right? You have to, again, plant the seed and, take care of it.
Yes. Yes. And if you couldn't find anyone who has a similar interest with you, you can always just, again, from all of your classes you've taken, the classes you've done well, try to talk to the professors in those classes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Leo. All right, so our next question is, if we are taking a couple gap years before graduate school, should we still ask professors? Absolutely. So this is a question that we get very often. So what happens if they don't remember me? So one important thing, again, is when you're in school here at UCI, you can continue to have those conversations with them, talk to them, let them know that you're interested in going to graduate school. You can actually ask them, at the time that I'm ready to apply, would you be willing to write a letter of recommendation for me? And they'll be like, of course, Carissa, whenever you're ready, just let me know. Just give me an email, give me a call, and I'll be there to help you write that for you. And so that's kind of one way to go about it. And so, 1 year, 2 years down the line, hopefully you're still maintaining that relationship with them, whether it's you send them an email from time to time. And then you can formally ask them with all the information that we talked about earlier. Leo, have you had any experience with this?
Myself, I didn't take any gap years, right? But then, like I said, but kind of goes back to my original answer to the if it's been so many years I've been talking to this professor, what should I do? It's kind of in a similar situation. 4 years after I took this professor's class, I asked him again for the recommendation letter. So it's kind of similar to that. I took a gap years. So just still, you have to ask professors. But again, if you are in an MBA program or if you're applying to a business school, then of course you don't need to, you don't necessarily need to ask recommendation letter from professors. But if it's PhD programs, for sure you still want to do it with the professors.
Mm-hmm. Great. So next question is, should you send a picture to the professors that might not remember you when emailing them for a letter? That's a really great question. So oftentimes I do come across students who include a picture on their resume or their curriculum vitae. That's kind of one way to go about it, but I wouldn't say that a picture is necessary or required. Like, essentially, hopefully they do remember you. I don't know, Leo, have you have you experienced this before?
Not really, and
Yeah.
also you can send it only if you feel comfortable with it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's actually not required, and most of the professors wouldn't really need it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, they should be able, if you said your name and what class you were in, it should jog their memory enough to remember who you are. If you have to send a picture to them, then they may not be the right person to be asking. But that's not to say that you can't include it in your resume, just for, the heck of it. Okay, so next question. I've never attended a professor's office hours. What is it like? How do you hold a conversation? How about you take this one, Leo?
Yeah, so if you just because I'm also a TA, right? So if you come to the office hour, most of the times you're asking questions. So if you attend a professor's office hour, it's the same thing. You start out with questions. Like I said, you don't go straight to the professor asking for like Rex. You'll be like, well, this is I'm kind of confused about this question. So you start out with the class materials first, and then you maybe extend to other outside materials like, oh, I saw your articles and I'm really confused, I'm really interested. So you don't really need to impress them. You don't need to show that how smart you are. Actually, it's good to show that actually you're not super clear with the class materials, and then you can extend those kind of questions to grad school or your interest in grad school. So don't feel panic. We're all human beings, and if you come to me and asking questions, that's a very good start. But of course, a lot of students just come to me asking that I'm interested in grad school. So can you give me advice about that? That's also a good way to start a conversation. And some of the students, one of the students just came to me, I remember last quarter, because there was this TA strike. And then she was just asking that, oh, are you doing well? Like, I saw this TA strike in UC Santa Cruz. So yeah, all of those kind of just warm greetings are good enough. You don't really have to come to me saying that I need to hold a conversation to impress this person. Not really.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So next question, I know we're pretty much out of time, but we'll try to answer these last three questions. By the way, we will be sending out the slideshow, we'll be sending out the recording, so you will get this information. And then we'll try to provide you also additional resources. I know there was a question, is there more templates of asking for letters of rec on the SSARC website? We'll certainly provide you with some important links that we would like to share with you as well. So another question that we got in was, should you only ask a professor if you ace their classes? So this is really interesting. I would say, it doesn't matter whether you got an A or a B. I think what's important is that you made the effort to engage in the course. You did all your assignments, you made the deadlines on time. And I think what the professor is obviously looking for is, did they earn the grade that they deserved, and did they work hard in that specific course? Did they show improvement throughout the course? And so I don't necessarily think that the only people that you can ask are the classes that you got A's in, because there are some students out there that sometimes it comes really easy to them and they're able to ace the course without even ever engaging with the professor. So that's kind of my tidbit. I don't know, Leo, do you have any suggestions about this?
Yeah, I don't think the grade definitely matters, but I don't think it matters to the degree that you have to get an A. Maybe a B plus is fine, but of course you definitely don't want to talk to the professor or ask the professors that you got a C in their class. So grade matters, but not to the most significant extent. Still, maintaining the relationship or building the relationship is the most important thing.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to do our last question and then we will sign off. So our last question is, how long should you wait until asking a professor for a letter of recommendation? So that depends. I mean, you know, if you feel comfortable enough to ask them, if you feel like they could write you a strong letter recommendation, and let's say you're at that point where you need to start asking because you have some deadlines coming up, then you want to make sure that there's at least, you know, the 1 to 2 months in advance of when you're asking. But Leo, do you have any other recommendations for how
Yeah,
long to wait? Mhm.
I think it depends on your timeline, right? If you're applying this coming up fall quarter, then of course you need to start ASAP, right? You need to maybe ask whenever you have the chance. But then since I prepared like pretty early, so I really took the time to build up the relationship with the professor. So I frequent their office hours, and then I keep talking to them about grad school. So I asked maybe after maybe some of them maybe after like 10 or 12 visits because I got enough time, and I even talked to professors after I finished the class. And one of the professors, I worked for him when I was undergrad, so I got more chance to meet this person. So it really depends on your timeline. So for me, I didn't have the rush to ask in a very early stage, but if you're applying soon, then you need to ask maybe after maybe 2 or 3 visits.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Leo. And thank you so much to everyone who is here attending this webinar. Hopefully you can make it out to future SSARC webinars. But yes, take a look at your inbox, and we'll be following up with you with some important links in this recording and the slideshow as well. But that is all for us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.